Welcome to another exciting episode of Revving Up with RevEng. I'm your host, Quang, and I'm joined by my partner in crime, Carmen Olmetti. Hi, Carmen. Good morning and welcome.
Thanks, Quang. Yeah, excited to be here.
We have an exciting and special episode for you all today because we are joined by Penry Price. Welcome, Penry.
Love being here. Nice to see you guys.
Very, very nice to see you. And thank you for spending some time with us on a Friday. And I have to ask, that's a real background behind you, correct?
It's a real background. If I look at all of yours, everyone's got sort of the bookshelves background, but yes, this is a real background that I spend a lot of time in this position.
That's awesome. Awesome. Well, Penry, you've had an amazing career, right? That spanned traditional media, digital, and I'm just really curious, and I'm sure our audience as well, at what point in your career did you know it was the right time to pivot? And when did you know it was time to kind of hunker down and stay?
I don't know if you ever know, like, comfortably, honestly. I think there's not like the easy button that you pressed. It's like, okay, now I'm ready to make this move or that move. And so I think to me, it's sort of intuition, it's gut, it's conversations with people that can give you some perspective, maybe people you trust, people that are older that have been through some of these choices or times. So, for me, I do think I centered my traditional media career, which was in publishing for a long time. There was a moment when I recognized as a revenue driver, as a leader of revenue and the go-to-market team, I was recognizing the challenge that we had on the cost side. So if you think about revenue, there's always the top line growth and the revenue coming in, but there's also the cost to get that revenue that you've got to recognize. In traditional media, traditional publishing at the time, postage was getting more expensive, trucking was getting more expensive, paper was like all the things that actually were the product itself or how to get the product to market were rising in cost. And then you had just a new challenge against traditional media, which was the internet for advertising dollars and attention. I looked at it as there's a moment here where the business environment is changing. I had an opportunity to go over to Google at the time, and it was early days for Google. It was already recognized, this was early 2004, but already recognized as a successful, sort of new search business or experience on the web. I really wasn't sure what was going to happen. I don't think anybody knew at that time. People forget that Yahoo was an incredible property, incredible search property as well. So it wasn't really a foregone conclusion that this was a success in the making. It was time to make that change from traditional media to digital because I felt like if I invested a few years, 2, 4, 5 years there, be better prepared for whatever came next.
Yeah.
So it was just about preparation and for learning how to navigate my next job, not just that job then, but it was going to prepare me for, I thought, a better future.
Fantastic. And clearly that's paid off in a lot of ways. You're making judgments on risk and reward, right? And of all those bets, are there any particular that really paid off? And then how did you come to that conclusion? I'm going to bet on this initiative, this product, this team, whatever that may be.
Yeah, I think it was, first of all, you have to bet on yourself. Are you prepared to make that change? And are you willing to work hard? Are you willing to move? I felt like that lateral move into this new area was still going to be worth it because I knew I was going to work hard. I knew I was going to give everything I could. But the other thing you bet on is the product and the people you're going to be working with. And so it was the first time where the bet that I made on that one was, am I going to be surrounded by people that are going to pull me along with them? Are they going to invest in me? Are they going to help me be successful? Are they the people that I want to learn from? Are they the people that are going to be inspiring for me on a daily basis to get better in my professional life? And so the bet was first on myself, like, am I willing to work hard and make this change? And the second was making sure that the people that I'm going to go work with, are they going to be ones that are going to be sort of givers to me? Are they going to be ones that are willing to work with me and help me? And are they going to be the ones that I'm going to really learn from? Sort of those two aspects of the people side. But that was the real bet, was less about product. It was less about the name of the company, Google. That didn't really matter in my mind. It was the people that I was going to be around and associated with. Were they going to help me be successful?
This next question is going to be a bit of a leading one because I've been in the room with your team of leaders. And what I remember was such a level of consistency, not in terms of thought or even approach or style, but consistency in terms of dedication to do what was right. How do you do that, right? Like, how do you fill a room with people that all at the end of the day want nothing but the best for the company. Even to this day, I look back as one of the ahas of my life of, wow, I hope to someday be able to do that for myself.
I mean, it's sort of talked about certainly a lot. And it was even something I saw at Google, which if you guys might remember, but in the early days at Google, Larry Page, the founder with Sergey, Larry reviewed every single hire that was about to be made across the entire company.
Wow.
And when there were thousands of employees, this was not early startup stage. This
Wow.
got to, 2,000 people, 5,000 people. He was still reviewing because the bar he felt was that important. It was that high because talent is that important in an organization. And the commentary was always sort of A people hire A people, C or B or C people hire B or C people. That sort of was the first time I'd witnessed that kind of commitment to talent. And I certainly saw the payoff in the people I was associated with and worked with. It's hard, but the only thought I would say on this is it's worth it.
Yeah. I imagine it'd be harder to have a room of A players and then there's that one C plus that somehow got through there and everyone's wondering what happened, right?
It's demotivating for those A players. It slows them down, especially in today's world of work where there's a lot more collaboration than ever before. So you rely on each other. There's not as much individual contributors anymore. And so you're dragged down by somebody. The other is that person taking a space of an A player. And so then you get into productivity of that person and the ability to deliver. There's multiple ways that C or D player can really hurt an organization.
It sort of reminds me of use a sports analogy that seems to be the theme here. Coach Saban, he says something, I'm paraphrasing, where it's like, high performers do not like mediocre performers and mediocre performers do not like high performers, right? Like everyone has to be bought in to the vision and to the strategy and on the same page. And I think it sounds like, Penry, that's a lot of what you're speaking with as well. It's not even just an A player and, hey, I happen to be the smartest or the most experienced, but also being bought into the sort of overall direction of the company and being able to work well with others. As you mentioned, it's highly collaborative. So yeah, nothing really to add there other than just reminding me of that quote.
Yeah, and you're right, by the way, Carmen, to point out, like it is not just A, meaning that some person was the best at that skill, how they contributed to a team. It's how they showed up to the office. It was A, how they, from a result standpoint, bought into what the vision was. That's what an A player is. It is all of the above in any kind of interaction. They bring their best to that place and work. And so, that is something that, again, I'm appreciative that you notice it. I felt lucky to work in that room with everybody that contributed the way they did, that loved what we were doing, that bought into the bigger picture. And it's a real benefit when it works because you see it and you feel it.
Absolutely. As a leader of leaders, how do you know how to mentor and develop based on what you just said? There's folks that are going to be valedictorian varsity players, and those are folks that are so committed to the vision and mission and bring different strengths. And how do you, as the leader of leader, provide the right mentoring, guidance, and vision for the team?
Well, I think first of all, you have to recognize what your commitment was to bring in A players. Then you actually have to deliver on how you treat those A players. And you can't micromanage. They want autonomy. They want to create. They want to have some space to explore. They want to sort of have some ways that they can contribute to where we're headed. It's always my job as a leader to make sure that I was working for them. If I put in certain parameters or I don't communicate well about where we were going, or I didn't get buy-in and I lost the commitment or drive from those A players, it's all on me. It's not them. I really had to think about, how do I make sure I'm creating the place that I would like to work is supportive, collaborative, but also gives me enough autonomy where I can sort of run my own business, if you will, if I'm in that position, to the degree that I want to as that leader of leaders. I'm there to make sure I remove barriers in their way to get that done.
I can certainly attest to this because I also felt that when the three of us worked together as a service provider, you had engaged us to come in to answer a specific question. Sometimes the client will be going through like a fast food order. Do I have my fries, 2 sauces? If you recall, we took it in a different direction because we realized the issues were in a different direction. And I remember very frankly going to this meeting, and I was like, I don't know how he's going to take it because the issue is actually a much deeper issue. You did what I wasn't expecting, which is you listen, use the team. I remember I can actually visualize. We were crammed in this small office in New York City. I think it had one window, if I'm not mistaken, but not many. And you allowed it to progress, right? And I think that's surprisingly, it's not a common trait, right? You often get people that are command and control, like I'm the leader. You will do what I tell you to do, and you would do it exactly I tell you to do. I will tell you if it's good or bad. So I guess this is my chance to say thank you because that was one of my really fond experience, not just as a we did a good job, but like that's the way I want to model my career as a leader. So thank you.
Well, you just get, of course, and it, is you were a part of it. As I said, it's the same as we were just talking about. It's a great team trying to get to the right result. There wasn't one direction. It was just, hey, how are we going to get there? And if we have to change, that's okay if we're going to get to the right answer. And so as a leader, I had sort of developed my own acronym to aspire to be this kind of person. And it was sort of those 5 components and letters. I for inspiration. I think inspiration comes in many shapes and sizes. It doesn't just mean like you've fought through some kind of sickness, or it doesn't mean you can be the greatest public speaker. It's like you can inspire in a lot of ways, but as a leader, I think you have to inspire. Satya Nadella talks about that piece as creating energy. The leader has to create energy. The other one is consistency, which you already touched on. I always strive for consistency to make sure your team understands this is how it's going to be. Then they can actually better predict and prepare how to move forward as a team and how they contribute because they know exactly how we're all going to show up every day. Awareness is the third letter. Frankly, awareness is the secret to all great leaders. All great leaders to me are incredibly aware about themselves. So they've got tremendous self-awareness. And they're also aware of everything that surrounds them, the industry they're in, the team they're on, the company they're leading. They are incredibly connected to and aware of. But then the fourth one, which is what I'm getting to here, is yes. I always try to say yes. At least that's where my default is, to say yes. And now I make sure I get to, people have to earn the yes, but my default is wanting to say yes. It's so different than most in corporate life, where most is no, I don't have the budget. We can't do that. It's not a priority. No, we can't hire another person. No. It's just the way we live. I had a leader who used to carry around a little banker placard, and he'd put it on any desk he'd be in at that day. And it said, try hard to say yes. To me, that was like this moment, like, yes, actually, it's so incredibly freeing and very trusting when you say yes to people, both, by the way, in our personal lives and professional lives. And so that what you're talking about is hopefully a manifestation of my desire as a leader or as a teammate to say yes to people, to listen to what they've worked on, to trust that they've put in the effort, they know what they're doing, to give them the chance to prove it. That's where I come from almost every time I'm in those decisions. I'm defaulting to yes, but help me get there with you.
How does someone earn the right to get yes? Because I agree. I think that is really counter to everything people you hear now, right? Everyone writes about say no, right? Guard your schedule, right? Like, no, only focus on these things. And what you just described, Penry, is the complete opposite. How do you do that without working 120 hours a week?
I hardly ever said no to mentees. My calendar looked pretty crazy with, and that was Mike Gampson, who you guys might know, who had been a leader at LinkedIn. When he left, he was telling me that he had something like 160 mentees across his life. And I was always like, how do you have time? That was a model I tried to use the last few years. I don't know how many mentees I had, but I never said no. But yeah, how do you get there? I think so people have to earn the trust. If I've seen consistency over time, I will trust that person has done the work. They've done the research. They've put in the diligence, and they actually have an idea they believe in. And I know from their past that they're going to work really hard to make that successful. So one is sort of a track record for that person or team to say yes to. If it's a new person or new idea, maybe we work harder at it, but I'm still wanting to say yes. That person have to have a ton of passion, be willing to be held accountable to that progress against this initiative they want to do or whatever it is. So there's guardrails you put up. There's ways to measure progress. There's a bunch of ways to do it. I found it to be myself when anyone said yes to something I wanted to do. Some of the most inspiring work I ever got to work on was when somebody took a gamble or tried with me to say, yes, go for it. That's the kind of person I want to work for. So I always felt like if I could come in with that default feeling that I want to say yes to this, but this person is to prove it, et cetera, what we just talked about, they're going to have a great professional experience. It might not work. They're going to be able to try something new or do something they believe in. That feels like something I'd always like to be supportive of.
The acronym super powerful. It's funny because Penry, we obviously work together in a different capacity than you and Quang. I work with you as a partner on comp side and strategy side, and then the go-to-market side. Hearing it after the fact, it's just a flood of memories coming back. I remember there was one particular project, I don't name it, but that's where, kind of Quang and his team came in. I remember working with the HRBP leaders at the time. We saw a very specific challenge or problem within the teams and more broadly within the comp side too. I remember putting together this, and this was before ChatGPT or Claude. So I had the actually raw horsepower, pen to paper, hours of thought and review and revision. I remember vividly, I was on vacation over a shutdown and my wife was like, why are you getting up at 5 a.m? We were in Puerto Rico, I think. And I was like, I have to get this done type of thing. And I remember being nervous presenting it, even though, obviously we've been in the room together, 500 times at that point. It's funny because it was one of those things where it wasn't like, you of course challenged things and asked questions and it was very thoughtful, but I walked out of that like, why did I spend 2 weeks worrying? It was such a great meeting. And that wasn't a one-off either, presenting recommendations for future comp plans and all of the big decisions that went through you. And there was a lot on the go-to-market side and the comp side. I never really thought of like, hey, there's a deliberate way that Penry's showing up to this, as opposed to this is just Penry, right? Like even the teams on the back end would always say Penry is the best. Like he's so easy to talk to, so comfortable. And I say that now because whether it was deliberate or not at the time, from my perspective, it really does influence the teams on the back end, right? It makes us more comfortable, much more confident. I do remember one time there was something that came up where I remember your initial reaction wasn't to agree to it. In fact, it was the opposite. You were pretty steadfast that we shouldn't do it. And I was pretty steadfast that we should. To me, it's a dereliction of my responsibility if I don't at least present it again. And if they say no, that's fine. And I remember you made a comment after, and me being me, I can be a little dramatic, just pause and you're like, if you feel that passionate about it. So yeah, it was interesting. Hearing that just made me think of all those interactions and how impactful it is on the teams that are leading all that work to be able to go into that space and know that there's a leader that's supportive, will listen, and will immediately just dismiss what's being put in front of them. So
it goes back to talent. We just said before earlier, like, if we know you've got pros on the comp team and pros on the RevOps team and pros on the marketing side, wherever it is that you interact, then you should, at least in my mind, believe in their passion that they think they can do something right. So again, this shouldn't be a surprise. I just do find actually what you said, it's not always normal. And so I do think, to me, that's too bad, because I think it actually does bring the best out of teams. It brings the best out of people. They connect to the team and the work better. It follows that same thinking. Hire the best A players, put them in the roles they're good at and they're qualified to do the work, and then allow them to do work. And you as the leader, remove barriers in their way to make sure they can get their best work done.
Thinking about it, reflecting a bit, I think in some ways it's circular. The people that don't do that are the B, C players, because they need to feel right, because they don't feel like they are at par with their teammates. And so it starts with that very first thing you said. If you allow your standard to go down, you will get that behavior, because folks, I've been around plenty of those folks that need to feel I am the right person. I am the person that did this, right? Versus I'm surrounded by a team that got this done. I have one last question for you, Penry. For this episode, with all the noise in the market around AI and everything that's happening on the technology front, what advice would you give to folks thinking about a career in sales, particularly in the media space? Is this still something worth pursuing, or should everyone become a Chat GPT prompt engineer, make whatever they do? Do whatever they do.
Yeah. I mean, I wish I knew the answer to this. I think all of us are trying to figure it out. I come from the camp that if you're in a position, at a job, at a company, or at a category or industry where you're learning, and they're people around you. Again, as I said, they're sort of my principles that have served me really well in terms of choices I've made. And I've used these principles again and again, which is I'm going to go somewhere, I'm going to learn, I'm going to be surrounded by people that I can learn from and are going to support me. It really doesn't necessarily matter the name of the company. Now, I would say you don't necessarily want to go towards a industry that is sort of failing or going backwards. And, we don't have to name them. We're all sort of think in our head, like, okay, I don't think that sort of industry or that group of jobs even are going to be growing over the next 20 years. You want to go somewhere where there's capital moving towards and investment going into an area. That is something you certainly would want to think about. Do I believe in AI? Absolutely. I'm trying to study and use some tools, but study as much as I can to try to, again, learn and figure out where could I go work that I could apply what I've done in the past to this new way we're all going to be working. I'll hopefully find a place like that. I do think there's going to be plenty of jobs created, whether they be prompt engineers or new things we don't know about. That typically happens in all these disruptions and transformations via technology or other things that change the world. There's lots of new jobs created, but we're all attracted, sadly, to the car crash and the disaster side of the story. And so that's what we all hear about, are jobs going away. I know that to be not true, but there are going to be displacements. There are going to be jobs that don't really make as much sense in the next 3 to 5 years as they do today or have in the last 10 years. And so for me, it's about learning, it's paying attention to what's going on, being very aware of what are the changes, either small nuance change or large dramatic change in the industries you're working in, and start to figure out, how am I going to navigate through this? It's important to pay attention. The last thing you want to do is, I have friends that are still in the magazine industry. They never wanted to change. They felt like this was a big business. It's going to stay a big business. And, unfortunately now they really don't have the adaptability or skill sets or experiences to make a real pivot. Paying attention and being honest with yourself that things are changing. They're changing quickly. Not sure what's happening, but I'm going to be aware of this. I'm going to listen. I'm going to learn. I'm going to watch. It will serve you well to make sure then you're navigating your career into a place that should be pretty safe in the next few years.
Awesome. Sound advice. That's all the time we have for this episode, but please don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and we'll be back next time with another exciting and very informative conversation with Penry Price. Thank you so much for listening.